Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. You know, it's interesting. Schedules can matter. NFL will release their schedule on Wednesday, and I think it's a big deal. We all know who everybody plays already, but it's the order. For instance, playing in Denver high altitude in September when you're coming out of camp has always been tough. Playing Andy Reid in September, tough. Some of the defensive coaches experiment more offensively early. Belichick never had a great September. So, and also back-to-back tough games, road games. You know, Miami would prefer to never go into Buffalo with Tua as a quarterback in December and January. They'd love to get that game out in, September, October when the weather's great. So there are absolute, dome teams. They don't want to play December, January games up north. When the league had a gap between games 2 and 3, Denver, Minnesota, and it hurts Minnesota's momentum and it gives Denver time to prepare, you get that extra film session or 3, it's a totally different team. I mean, Denver was so bad defensively, so lethargic. Now it's almost like Denver saying, let Ant get his. He's going to get 40. We're not going to stop him. And let's shut down the other dudes. But I mean, it does feel like to me that time, an extra day or 2 here for a really smart veteran team and a good staff feels so substantial.
No, absolutely. Minnesota came out with pretty bad energy in game 3. Ant himself admitted it after the game. He's like, I came out with low energy. Meanwhile, for 3 consecutive days, Denver had to sit around and listen to everyone talk shit about them. like literally, it was like they just got humiliated for 3 consecutive days. And, I said after game 2, it wasn't really about basketball to me. I thought that Minnesota brought a level of physicality that Denver had not seen at all in the previous 5 rounds that they had played in the postseason. And I thought they got a little caught off guard by it. And specifically in game 2, they crumbled mentally in a way that they never had before, right? And honestly, do you remember in game 3 at the beginning, that play when Anthony Edwards was messing with his shoulder for like 30 seconds? Yeah. That was the first play of the game. And on that play, Nikola Jokic just rocked him with the screen, just like a super, super hard screen. And when I went back and looked over the film in that game, like really all that happened was Denver did all the same things that they have done all season. They just did them harder, faster, with more force. They finally met the physical confrontation. And when they did, you found out pretty quickly they can still score on these guys. It's not like Jamal hasn't seen a lengthy perimeter defender before. Of course he has. It's not like Jokic hasn't seen 2 centers on the floor before. Of course he has. They've all seen that before. They just didn't handle it well. And then the big one here, and this is something that I called out before the series, and I really was surprised that it took this long, but Minnesota's a mediocre offense. Anthony,
listen,
go ahead.
Listen, Anthony, that's what I think Denver looked at and said, just give Ant his 40. They have a lot of very good athletes and length, but if Karl-Anthony Towns, like tonight, is just kind of just wandering, there's not really a second scoring option on this team. There really isn't. So you need Towns, who's always been, to me, talented, but a little flaky, a little inconsistent. You know what I mean? Like, Anthony Davis gives you the same defense every game. Karl-Anthony Towns, who is more gifted offensively, should be as good offensively as Anthony Davis is defensively. He's not. He's lost. And I thought in this game, well, what are we doing here? And when he doesn't deliver, it doesn't matter what Ant could score 50. I mean, Jordan was scoring 63 and they couldn't beat the Celtics. So I do think Denver just said, listen, we're not going to stop this kid and make everybody else work. And I think your point is right, is that if Towns is off, it's an athletic team. They're long. They almost have an extra wing defender and one less shooter than they need.
No, absolutely. And it really comes down to this. They were a mediocre offense all season long. And then they've got a bunch of these streaky guys like Cat, guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, guys like Naz Reid, who are capable of playing at a higher level offensively. But Phoenix couldn't really play them out of that. Denver's lackadaisical defensive effort in the first two games couldn't play them out of that. But as soon as Denver tightened the screws, Cat fell apart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker fell apart, Naz Reid fell apart. Like immediately, Rudy Gobert looks like a damaging offensive player because he's got stone hands and he
Right.
can't like make quick decisions when he catches on the roll. And so, like literally, Minnesota looked like regular season Minnesota. If anything, it's really impressive that Ant is demonstrating his leap is for real. And specifically on the Karl-Anthony Towns front, this Karl Towns reminds me of a specific type of player I've seen several times in NBA history. The most recent example kind of reminds me of Kevin Love. Now, obviously, Cat has a better pedigree, but like it's like the big scoring, like kind of hybrid big, but one that's not actually that superior of an athlete compared to his peers.
Right.
And that can
Right.
shoot. And so what happens is during the 82 game regular season, they get their 25 points a night because they can bully smaller players and they can hit threes. But every single time Kevin Love would run into a really big athletic forward, someone like a Thaddeus Young or a Draymond Green, and just render Kevin Love into a spot up shooter. And then everyone be like, oh, LeBron made Kevin Love a spot up shooter. It's like, actually, that's all he can do when you reach these super high levels of intensity. Aaron Gordon demolished Karl Towns tonight. Just completely just snatched his soul for the world to see.
Well, he's a much better athlete. He's a much better
exactly.
athlete.
It's like the guy who's a little bit shorter but stronger, more athletic, kind of like Draymond or Thaddeus Young, like I was talking about with Kevin Love. They can beat Karl Towns to spots and so make it so that he can't drive. And then if he can't drive, he's suddenly just a shooter. And it's like with the shots aren't going in, then his impact craters. And so, yeah, like there's another conversation to be had. I mean, you even when Minnesota was playing well, were pointing out like, is Karl-Anthony Towns still going to be here in the future? And it's like there's a real conversation to be had about the team build of Minnesota in the sense that Karl-Anthony Towns is what he is. He's never going to become a super reliable secondary shot creator. You can't let Ant go out there by himself every night as the only guy who can get to his spots and create shots. So I don't know what they do about that in the long run, but tonight was the last two games. This is not game 1 and 2 of a series where you're feeling each other out. Everyone knows exactly what everyone's good and bad at right now, and nobody on Minnesota can score except for Ant, and that's a major problem.
Well, and also, I mean, Jokic and Ant are transcendent. So to some degree, going into a game, you're giving up 30 plus. Bird, Jordan, Kobe. Some guys are just like, you've been in the gym. Like, that guy's going to get his. The series really comes down to, like, it's amazing. Gordon versus Karl-Anthony Towns. You're like, oh, that's kind of what the series has come down to, because you can only do so much to neutralize a superstar in this sport. And then all of a sudden, and again, this is what champions do. We forget this. I remember a couple of years ago, the Celtics played the Warriors in the finals. And through the first couple of games of the series, through 3 games, Boston was so much better than Golden State. And you're like, Steve Kerr gets an extra day. There's preparation. They go to Boston. And you're like, who unplugged the electricity with the Celtics? Like, what happened? And I think the mistake I make thinking Denver's cooked is you give these championship teams time. They're well coached. I mean, Malone's been there. I mean, you forget. I mean, he was like 7 years in, and they just let it bake. I mean, there was no pressure. They couldn't win with Jokic for years. So this is a team that's, they've been through a lot of these battles. They've lost a lot of them in the early years, but they've had to make major adjustments. And, I rush to judgment. I look at Denver now and I'm like, oh, this is what I thought the series would look like, which is, again, they would match their length and physicality, and Jokic would just, Murray and Jokic are both elite scorers. So I will say this. I don't know why the media does this. They get so protective from people that don't need it. But Ant is spectacular. Like, I always felt this about, and I'm not saying he's Jordan, but he has some Jordan qualities, and that's okay. Mahomes, they're talking about Caleb Williams has Mahomes qualities. Yes, he does. All the scouts are saying, hey, he plays like Patrick Mahomes. There are things about Ant, but the most Jordan thing about him is, I remember watching Jordan against Phoenix in his prime. And I was sitting on the couch with a friend watching it. And I'm like, okay, he's not the best shooter, the best ball handler. He's not the quickest guy in the league. And he's 6'6". Why does it look like he's like the only Division I player playing at the Y? Like, it's like he makes it look so easy. And gets past people on the first step. These are NBA athletes. He just gets past everybody. So when you watch it on TV, I don't think you would appreciate it. The ability to, everybody knows where he's going. He loves the first step. He sizes you up. He makes the game look easy. Mahomes does this. Jordan did this. You're like, why? How? I'm watching Ant, and even against good defenders. I mean, Jamal Murray switched off to him one time. I'm like, this is not even competitive. Murray's a world-class athlete. I mean, you've been in gyms with guys, but I look at this and I'm like, when guys start making 38 points look easy, there's about 3 in the league at any one time that can do that. Maybe 1.
Yeah, there's athletic, and then there's athletic among the athletes. It's like an entirely different stratosphere, right? And like that's kind of to me the difference between like a Jason Tatum and an Anthony Edwards. Like Jason Tatum is a very good NBA athlete, like he's close to that, like truly transcendent. Yes. But there's clearly a difference between Ant sizing up an elite defender and beating him off the dribble, and Tatum doing the same thing. It's like that next level of elite top tier athleticism. Honestly, regardless of what happens the rest of this series, and I do think Denver is gonna pull this out now. I think they've effectively just rendered Minnesota's offense useless, and they're gonna go home, and I think they're gonna win Game 5. And the biggest thing too is like Minnesota hasn't been particularly competitive in either of these games, which is a major concern, right? But like no matter what, it's very clear that Anthony Edwards is here to stay. I think he's the next guy in that like line of truly transcendent great American basketball players. Like it went from MJ to Kobe, and it went from Kobe to LeBron. And like there have been guys along the way that have had their little moments, but nobody that really had the potential to take over the league for a long time. And can't you just see it, Colin? Can't you just kind of imagine what the next 10 years are like for Ant? You could just kind of imagine him continuing to ascend and getting better and better. I started to think tonight, like if Ant could have pulled this game out, it could have been one of those transcendent moments you think about, like, you know, LeBron in like 2007 or 2008 kind of thing. And honestly, like Denver's just too good. Like that's really all it is. Yeah. Like LeBron ran into the '08 Spurs and got swept. So like at a certain point, it doesn't matter how good you are at that phase of your career. It is a team sport. And like literally while all of his veteran teammates were falling apart, he was continuing to ascend. It was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and this is appropriate. Jordan couldn't get through a fully formed Pistons or Celtic dynasty. So, I mean, Denver's fully formed. They have the experience. They're better offensively. They have Minnesota's length. So, again, this is the way it works. It's the baby steps. He comes in, he pushes and makes a Denver, step back. They got hit in the chin. They dazed the champion and they lost. That's what happened to Jordan. That's what happens to LeBron. So, to me, this is totally appropriate. We are amazed by the individual player, but they still have tweaking to do. I mean, we all know what Minnesota's going to do in the offseason. They're probably going to move Karl-Anthony Towns, and they're going to get more offensive players. I mean, eventually Jordan needed Pippen and Kerr. You know, I mean, like you don't have to be a nightly great player, but you do have to find players that take something off Ant's plate a little bit.
Do you think Minnesota should go after KD?
It's not terrible because, again, the great gift of KD, you can give him the ball 8 seconds on the shot clock, 4, he'll get a great look. He doesn't need, it's a little Klay Thompson, but obviously much better. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. That's why the Jalen Brunson KD works. The emotional part of KD to the Knicks, Tibbs, that style, is he willing for it?